I think we're just waiting on, I mean, we have enough. We'll get started, I guess. Doug and Joe, Stefan and Brian. There's Joe. Bill, how you doing?
Mr. Chairman, how are you?
Fine, thank you. Don, I see you there. How are you? All right, I guess it's, well, I have 7 o'clock, so I think we'll get started. We have a quorum on the screen, I believe, Steve, correct?
You do, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Well, welcome. Hopefully, there's not too many fumbles today. We'll get through this pretty easily, I think. Appreciate you all jumping on. I talked to Steve a little bit through the summer and wanted to just cover a few things in advance of, say, the tri-board or whatever. So that was kind of the purpose of this meeting. Any public participation out there? Seeing none. I sent out the minutes late, apologize, June 25th minutes, 2020. I don't know if you saw that email a little after 6 or had a chance to look at it. But I've reviewed it. I will entertain discussion or motion from the group.
This is Dan. I'll move approval.
Second it.
Dan, second by Joe. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the June 25, 2020 minutes? Do I need a roll call, Steve?
Technically, you should have a roll call.
That's fine. Is Doug Butler's not on? Joe Bertrand on the minutes?
Yes.
Thank you. And Bill Boudry? Bill, motion on the minutes? I mean, you have a vote on the minutes? Bill Boudry? He's frozen. Stefan not here. Brian not here. Amy?
I'm here. Stefan is here.
Stefan just got on, yeah.
I'm sorry, Stefan. We're talking about the minutes. I don't know if you had a chance to look at them. We're looking for a vote on the minutes, June 25th.
Yep, they're good for me.
Thank you. Anybody else join? Amy on the minutes?
Yes, I'm good.
Thank you. Dennis?
Yes.
Evan?
Aye.
Thank you. Gerard?
Aye.
Don?
Yes.
Thank you. Joanne?
Aye.
And Dan?
Aye.
And I am a yes as well. So the minutes are accepted, unanimous vote. Thank you very much. On the agenda, introduction to new finance committee members. There are 2 new members. We were able to get a hold of Mr. Carroll, which is sometimes a situation over the summer, but it's worked out. And we had interviews and some very good candidates, and one of them is on with us tonight. So the candidates were interviewed, and 2 were chosen. We had 2 seats to fill, and both will be with us. One of them is with us now, and I'd ask Tara just to introduce himself and give a little bit of his background, please.
Thank you, Jim, and good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you. My name is Teray Howell. I live in the Greenwood section of town with my wife, Brandon, and a new resident to town, our infant son, Dalton, who is today turned 7 weeks, so forgive me if you all hear him in the background. Professionally, I'm an attorney at Nixon Peabody. I've been there for almost 10 years. In the litigation department. I primarily do work for companies involving commercial disputes as well as financial services litigation. And also a part of my practice includes fiduciary litigation, where I represent generally trustees of large trust funds. Sometimes those trustees are individuals, but often they're institutions like banks. So I thought that given my experience at volunteering for the town as a part of the finance committee was a good match, and I'm happy to be a part of this. I look forward to working with everyone.
Very good. Thank you and welcome again. Appreciate it. David had a prior commitment, but I see he jumped in, and David Mastrani is the other new member of the board. David, if you could just introduce yourself a little bit, please.
Yes, my name is David Mastriani, and I live at 41 Parker Road in town. Been a resident for 14 years now, and I have two boys in the public schools, one at the Galvin in 6th grade and one at the Walton in 3rd grade. My wife grew up in Wakefield. I've been a resident, like I said, for 14 years myself. I currently work at Wells Fargo in the community lending and investment group, which we do and invest and support and manage in affordable housing across the country. I've been in other accounting and real estate related roles in my career. And I manage a portfolio of deals for Wells Fargo right now on the professional side. And just getting back to the town, I've volunteered to coach my boys, and I see a lot going on, and we have challenging times right now, but a lot's been going on and all good stuff, and I hope to contribute and be a part of that and add value.
Very good, thank you. And if it was face-to-face, I'm sure you would get to know some of these people on the screen, but you will over time, both of you. So again, thank you both.
forward to it.
Appreciate you being part of the process, the interview process, and looking for your contributions on the committee. So once again, thank you. And if you don't know, everybody on the screen is basically a committee member, with the exception of Steve Mayo, who's the town administrator, and Kevin Gill, who is the town accountant. And this is a typical makeup of the members. And then Steve and Kevin have the pleasure of joining us when we meet. And then there are other department heads or whatever that are involved as necessary. So the rest of the folks on the call are members in various lengths of terms, but everybody has been a member for at least a few years. So. Okay, one of the reasons I wanted to get together was to talk about where we are to date fiscal year, and then talk about forecasting for next year. So I sent an email. Steve had graciously given me some info and sent a blurb a couple of weeks back. And Steve or Kevin, if you guys would just maybe give us an update on where we are FY 21, I'm sorry.
FY 21. All right, I will jump in. At this point, it's, well, first of all, new growth has been certified, a little over $1.2 million. We do know that. Free cash, although not certified yet, is around 7 million, Kevin? Yes?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Approximately $7 million.
And the good thing is that receipts are coming in at a good clip as far as the taxes are concerned. People are paying their taxes. But at this point in time, I think we will go into town meeting in November, and the first time in my memory, we will probably be setting, we'll be basically balancing the budget and getting us all ready to set out, so we can set our tax rate and we can send out tax bills without having a cherry sheet that has been voted on and finalized by the state government. What we do know is that at this point in time, the state legislature and the governor have agreed to hold, to fund local aid, our two major accounts of local aid being Chapter 70 money for the schools and unrestricted local aid, which is the vast majority of it, at last year's level. So for us, that really wasn't so bad, because we were counting on a much more of a deduction. And we really didn't get a huge bump over 2000, from 2001 over 2002 anyway, something that we lamented at the time, but I'm glad that we didn't plan for having $1 million increase in aid that we'd have to cut even more, at least on paper. So that's good. So what we are a little bit, so on local aid, state aid, we don't know what's going to happen. I'm pretty sure, I'm positive that those numbers will hold to the end of the year. I don't know what will happen after that. For those of you that are new, there's a section of the state law, I forget it's section 9C, which allows cuts in local aid by the governor and with the approval of the House and the Senate now in the middle of a fiscal year. So we're always concerned with that, and that may or may not happen this year, but it is in the back of our mind. The other issue that we're a little bit concerned with is local receipts. Local receipts we've been doing very, very well with over the last few years. And I know that this committee have had a lot of fun with Kevin and I on, we kind of put local receipts in at a lower level than consistently comes in every year. I think Kevin and I knew eventually we would be right. So maybe this is the year that we're right. But we are, and when Dan Sherman shares the forecast, he'll show that we've accounted for that. Our local receipts are really made up of excise taxes, on the automobiles. Fees charged by other departments, like building permit fees is a big part of it. Local option meals tax and hotel taxes, we get close to $1 million a year from both those accounts. That's an area that we think will come down significantly in this year, because people aren't staying in hotels and people aren't eating out as much anymore because of the economy, because of the size of the restaurants, their capacity. So we did meet with the forecast subcommittee, and we did feel that made some adjustments that we'll share. We feel that the painful changes that we made going into the June town meeting, cutting a number of the budgets, cutting capital in half, will sustain us through this year. I'm projecting that we'll use about $2 million in free cash to balance the budget, which isn't a bad number, really. We have 7, we'll drop back down to 5. The question is, will that be replenished during the year? Will money come in higher on the receipts? Will our different departments return money to the bottom line? Last year they returned about $2 million, but that was kind of a crazy year at the end of the year. But that was good. That really helped us out a lot, and we'll be sharing the numbers with you at our next meeting as we're pulling those together. So we went through the whole item, the whole forecasting, and we feel pretty confident that we will be okay over the next few years. One thing that's great that's embedded in our budget is OPEB. OPEB is embedded in our health insurance budget. That is at about $1.6 million. That we're thinking about holding that in that budget, in other words, not applying it to the OPEB account. If we had to look at things going crazy, we could look at that in the spring. So all in all, I think it was all in all, we're in better shape than I felt we were in June. The other caveat that I want to throw in there is that the CARES Act. So the town of Wakefield was allotted under the first federal stimulus package, $2.4 million in the CARES Act. We have used to date about $600,000 of that for expenses. And of that, we're going to kind of match, get some FEMA money to replenish it. So we could be back up around $2.4 million. The issue right now is that the CARES Act money that has already been allotted by the federal government and given to us or held for us by the state is you cannot use that at this point for revenue replacement. However, I do understand that that is under discussion, even as we speak, as the federal government looks about changing the regs on that. I was at a seminar today on it, and they talked about that being under discussion even as we speak. So we're throwing, I will tell you, every single COVID expense that I can find into that account to get reimbursed. And a lot of that has to do with the items we're doing at the schools for airflow and filters and things, PPE equipment, extra staff if we had to hire to cover issues, overtime for police and fire as we had people out with COVID scares. Any other changes? Cost of Zoom for the town, something that we're throwing into COVID. Cost of election services, although we get some from the state too. So I'll tell you that we're throwing everything in that we can think of, extra cleaning supplies to cover that issue. We had a great meeting with the forecast subcommittee. We can talk about that in a minute. Fiscal year 20, I think, closed out really well, and maybe Kevin can say a few words on that. But I want to thank the Finance Committee for all their help on this and every year. And I think the decisions that we made years ago by making sure we were prudent with our reserves, prudent in our spending, have are paying dividends right now. Now, Kevin, do you want to add anything?
Like you mentioned, the revisions from the town budgets in fiscal '20, a little over $2 million. On the revenue side, we brought in about 700,000 more than what we had budgeted to bring in. About 250,000 of that was one-time revenue. So all in all, on both sides, revenue and expense, we did really well last year. It'll be a challenge to do that again this year. With the cuts that we've done already to the '21 budget, and with, as Steve had mentioned, the hotel motel will probably be down considerably this year. So, but you know, we have the reserves to go forward. So hopefully everything will work out.
Very good. Just Steve, could for the good of all, OPEB, just explain what that is and the function that you fund every year, please.
Okay, so OPEB stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits. And what it means is that we have to make sure that we as a town have sufficient funds to cover the town's portion of employees' health insurance, when they retire and what have you. It's kind of the same thing as the pension. Our pension has to be fully funded at some point, and so does health insurance. It's a new, I'm not gonna say it's a law, it's a new accounting requirement in Massachusetts, or our federal government, I guess, actually. It used to be that it was kind of a note on your financials, but now it's become more formal and needs to be done. I would say we are one of the few communities around that are basically fully funding our OPEB liability, our OPEB shortfall or OPEB liability, which is going to save us millions of dollars in the long term by getting started on it. Dan Sherman's been very active in this, and he does this for communities all over the country. So we get the ability of his advice there. But so what we did is when we switched over to the GIC, and the town saved about $3 million in actual insurance costs. And at that point, we were putting nothing towards OPEB. I would say nobody was, but it was being talked about. We made the decision to embed in our health insurance budget what would be the full funding of OPEB, or about the full funding of OPEB every year. And so that is in the budget. It's actually a line item in that health insurance budget. We've been doing it faithfully. Oh my goodness, 8 years now, 7, 8 years now. And Kevin, how much is in that account? I forget.
A little over $18 million.
So we have 18 million in reserve. And the beauty of that is if things really get bad, we could actually dip into that to cover health insurance costs if we had to in the future. I'm not advocating that at all, but I'm saying that that's a nice other reserve that we have there. I would say that the union groups that we work with on this, the Public Employee Committee that just handles health insurance, are really very savvy. They really like the fact that we have OPEB. They talk about OPEB, which is really interesting to see union groups talk about it. So we've done really well with that. I hope and I think we will continue to do it in there, keep it in that account. The other good news that I got today is that because people are not going for elective surgeries, although the hospitals aren't doing well, the GIC is doing quite well because they're not paying for elective surgeries. So people are still paying their premiums into the GIC, but the GIC is not paying out. So GIC is showing a little bit of a surplus, or a pretty good surplus. So when we might be looking at very, very low changes in the cost of GIC insurance over the next few years. I'm hearing numbers of like 1%, which would be fabulous. But we forecast more because we're prudent. So that's a good thing. And for any seasoned veterans, new veterans, if you want to sit and have a discussion about OPEB, that's something that we're happy to do, as strange as that seems.
Very good. Any questions from the committee as to what Steve has spoke about so far? Kevin? Okay.
I was curious if there's any, I guess, month-to-month average in terms of receipts and revenues that the town is is witnessing this, during the COVID days as compared to previous years. Just to give us a sense of maybe how dire or what the actual variance is from the norm.
Yeah, I think for us, Kevin and I actually talked about this today. For us, it's a little bit better to look quarter to quarter because it kind of smooths out kind of issues. So I think we could have something pretty much prepared for you by the next time we meet. But that's a great question. Quarter to quarter might be better for us.
All right, Stefan, thanks. Anyone else? All right, now the next thing was to get an update from the forecasting committee, subcommittee, and that consists of Dan as the chair, Doug, Joanne, and Gerard are part of that committee. And now the hard part, trying to share my screen with Dan. Dan, do you need to share a screen or do you want to just speak about it?
Well, why don't we try the share, and if it doesn't work, so be it. Because I
Okay.
do have a spreadsheet that hopefully I'll try. Let's see if that works.
It's working. Look at that.
Yep.
Is it working? Oh, outstanding. So as everybody's familiar with the spreadsheet, except for the two new guys, and by the way, my own welcome to Ray and David. So what we've done is I'm gonna focus here, for example, on local receipts. For 2019, we received $8,253,000. I'd been assuming that 20 was going to be also 8253, and Mr. Gill just told me that it's going to be something other than that and maybe a little bit higher than that. But I went ahead and changed local receipts for fiscal year 21 to the relatively pessimistic number of 6,250,000, just to see what happens. I also left the state receipts at 10,750,000, which is where it was for fiscal year 20. So you can see where for 21 we grabbed 2.5 million in cash, and of course we'll have to grab some cash here to fill in the hole. And if I scroll down to the hole, if you will, our deficit for fiscal year 21 right now is set up to be about $2 million, as both Kevin and Steve have alluded to. I put in some assumptions regarding growth in state income. Local receipts, I had it moving up slowly just to be relatively pessimistic. You can see that here I only added $600,000 for 22, and then it slowly increases over time. And the deficit drops to 1.2 million, 1.2 again, 810, 389, and then it turns positive. The big reason for this to go down and get better is right here under the new construction. The power line that's going in has dug up most of Wakefield, it seems, and it made traffic a bit of a pain. They are about $350,000 into it in terms of our receipts for 21. So I deferred about 1.3 million into 22 on the assumption that they'll complete the project and we'll be able to bill the full amount. So that's an extra $1 million or $1.3 million in 22. And then it reverts back to the old growth figure of about 1.4 million starting in 23. But this extra $1.3 million is what really saves our bacon and keeps the deficit just to 1.2 million in 22, and then going down thereafter. So the other thing I did was look at our free cash and what happens there. So as we discussed at the end of 20, we expect roughly $7 million in free cash has been certified, or will be certified by the DOR. Because we have to use a bunch of free cash, it'll drop down to $5 million at the end of 21 and get down as low as about $1.7 million, $1.3 million, $1.4 million before rising again. And this is not doing anything to the budget, not making any changes, funding OPEB at the $1.6 million level, and then having regular increases in other budget items. So we're not taking any, what I would call drastic measures to make that change. So the other key set of figures is looking at our total reserves. I think everybody on this call, with the exception of 2 new guys, realize that we have a target of roughly 10% of our reserves, of our budget to be in reserves. And what will happen if this forecast holds up is we'll drop down to about 4.3% in 2025, and then it will turn around and start going back up. So, that's obviously a very good thing. I also added the Opeb Trust to this and the Opeb liability, just to get a sense of what happens if we do not, let's say, fund the 1.675 million for Opeb, but it'll still go up. And just adding one comment to what Steve has said, I do work on probably 40 or 45 Opeb plans. And I can tell you that of all the cities and towns, only the town of Dedham has a larger asset balance than we do. They're about $21.5 million. Everybody else is much less than that. Many are still at zero. For example, Lynn has no trust fund whatsoever. So obviously, we're definitely ahead of the game, which has really helped us out. So all in, even with this very pessimistic forecast, it looks like we'll survive pretty well. I think we'll be just fine going forward, unless something, other tragedy happens. One of the things I was going to add is I'm going to continue to do the forecast to still adjust this as we go forward. We're going to continue to update it whenever some changes happen. We're going to keep a close eye on this. And I'll also say that if somebody wants a copy of this spreadsheet, just drop me a note and I'll be happy to send it along. And with that, I'll turn it back over to the chairman, or if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer those.
Can I just point out one thing on this? Do you mind, Mr. Chairman? And
Yes, go ahead.
We spent a lot of time talking about this, and this is a great tool. And I just want to point out to particularly the newer members is that this forecast right here, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, assumes that we hit our budgeted numbers, forecast numbers for local receipts, no more, and that we don't return any money at the end of the year from departments.
That's correct.
So that has not happened in the past. So I think that, those numbers, I am cautiously optimistic that those numbers will be more in our favor as money gets returned, as it does every year, and as hopefully we hit a little bit more in the receipts. But a lot of that depends on the economy on the second part.
Yeah, I think that we're going to beat the 6.2 million significantly, because again, I always look at trends and what's going on. And I know the DOR says, you got to put out there, what you know. But I think we're going to probably closer to $7 million on local receipts than the 6.2. So this spreadsheet I set up to be relatively pessimistic.
Thank you.
So one other thing that just to remind or point out, on the fiscal 21 numbers, the way that we made the numbers is by bifurcating the capital budget. So there's $1 million that hopefully if those local receipts do come in higher, that's the first thing that we would want to return funding to.
Yeah, that's a good point. I should have said or pointed out that for fiscal year 21, it's at $1 million. But for fiscal year 22, I pushed it back up to $2 million.
And my point would just also be that it's when we're talking about capital budget, so unless we make up that, we're always going to be behind on the capital budget and the capital plan. So just drawing people's attention to that.
Great, Joanne, thanks. I was going to ask if any other subcommittee members involved on the forecasting side and planning that wanted to add anything else.
I'll just throw in ever so quickly, Jim, that Dan, thanks for adding those quote unquote balance sheet elements. I know we talked about it during budget season last year. It's proven now to be incredibly relevant. I think as we look at the various choices the town's going to have to make, that's an incredibly helpful addition to what is, you know, more typically the profit and loss type forecast. I thought that was great. Thank you.
Very good. Don, do you have a question, comment?
Yeah, just a question. Dan, you've got the total expenditure number, and then you've got the town meeting votes. What's the difference between those two, and what is the bottom line based on? Which one is the bottom line based on?
The town meeting votes does not include, for example, $1 million going to the debt service fund. That is actually a law change, so there's no vote there. We just have to. It's money that gets spent. It also, we don't vote, for example, on cherry sheet offsets, county assessments. There's a number of things that we pay that the town meeting never sees.
Okay, so your number is based on the 97 then?
Well, when I look at the deficit, I look at total expenditures,
Yep,
not the town meeting vote.
yep, okay,
Don, are you good with that?
yes, thank you.
Okay, great. And I'm sure most folks have used Zoom so much now that it's painful, but people do generally raise their hands in these types of discussions, and then I would call on them. So appreciate that. And then lower your hand before I would have to slap your hand. But Brian, I think you have a comment, a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to tie this into budget policy number 3 in the document that you sent around about our financial policy, saying that Wakefield will not use budgetary procedures that balance the budget at the expense of meeting future year's expenses, such as postponing or deferring expenditures, accruing future year revenues, or rolling over short-term debt. You know, and I was thinking about how we often have to shortchange capital, you know, due to fluctuating conditions. So at some point, I'd like to just, you know, talk that through, because, you know, I think it's a very important point, and I also recognize that there are times when we don't have options. We need to not spend as much on capital because otherwise we've got a bigger problem.
Right. Okay, and we will cover the document at a high level, but that's a great point, and that's why I wanted to get it out to folks. I had come across it talking to Steve, reviewed it, and thought it was good information for all of us. So, Stefan.
I just had a follow-up clarification to Brian's comments. Brian, were you referencing that 345 kilowatt power line that's being put in place?
No, not specifically. I was talking more about how sometimes, you know, like we're looking at the possibility, not certainly doing it now, but looking at the possibility of maybe spending less on OPEB. We typically will fluctuate the amount that we spend on capital, just as we're doing this year, right? It's down $1 million because of the uncertainty of the rest of the budget. That's really all I was talking about.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, what we could do, or I can do, is look at putting that $1 million, that shortfall for 21, and let's say making 23 and 24 an extra $500,000 or so, and see how that plays out. My guess is I think it'll play out okay. So we could, you know, up the capital budget in some future year to make up for what was lost in 21. I think we should be able to do that.
Awesome.
All right, were there any other questions, comments on the forecasting update, planning update? Seeing none?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to ask, this isn't a new financial policy, is it?
No.
Okay, we're just reviewing.
No, so not at all. It's an old document, and somebody else could speak to that. I don't know how old. Is that what you're referring to, the document that I sent?
Yeah.
There was no date on it, and I talked to Steve. I talked to Dan. Dan's been on the board a very long time. It was described as some time ago.
I would say 11 years ago.
I was going to say between 10 and 12 years ago, we put this together.
Split the middle.
Yeah,
Thank-
because I think we put it together with the 2008 crisis. And we were forced to make a number of difficult changes back then on the budget and revenue estimates. And at that point in time, we said we really need to put together a policy. And I recall, Steve and I and Kevin, town selectmen at the time, and some FinCom members, we all got together and we came up with this document.
I was just wondering, because there's a lot of, like the community compact grants, which I think are actually still going out, have like consultants and stuff you deal with to update these things. I not that I really even advocate for that. I think with the experience and intellect on this committee, you probably don't need to spend any money on a consultant like that. But I was just curious, and I only scanned it. I looked at it like 2 hours ago, so I don't want to pretend I'm all that knowledgeable on it. But I was just curious if we were talking about adopting a new policy.
Well, actually, there is one piece that I looked at, and I had completely forgotten about it since it's been so long.
Yeah. So what I liked about it, just excuse me, Dan, was the when I got on the board some time ago, Steve and Kevin and others would talk about policy, for free cash or for for other items, and I had asked once, twice, whatever about it. And, in the financial reserve section, it talks about those items that we speak about a lot and Steve talks about. So to your point, and I know Dan's going to talk about it now, that caught my eye. The rest of it, I have read it over. There's a number of interesting items in there, as Brian pointed out a minute ago. Their policies, are they guidelines, are they mandates? We could get into that debate, but there's some good information in here. And again, I liked it because of the financial reserve items that we've talked about for years on this board. So Dan, I know you probably wanted to speak on pieces of that. So.
Yeah, there was one item that kind of caught my eye, and like others, I only spent just a few minutes this afternoon looking at before the meeting. And we probably should at some point make some recommendations to the town council for some modifications. But one item was the reserve fund. For those who have been on the committee for a number of years, every June we go through reserve fund transfers and figure out where there's a budget shortfall. And we've been at about $300,000 as our reserve fund in the budget for many years. I don't know how many years, but it's been a lot. Well, in a policy, it says the reserve fund ought to be between 0.5% and 1% of our expenditures minus a couple of items. Well, that's like $500,000, not $300,000. And I know Steve brought this up once or twice in the last few years about maybe increasing it 300,000, but we've been able to make that work. So the question then becomes, should we change the policy or should we increase the budget for reserve fund? And there might be some other items in this document that might need that kind of closer examination. So I would encourage everybody to spend some time, going over it. Obviously, we have to now delete town selectmen and make it town council, but I think we should, address that reserve fund, and there might be some other stuff like that need to be tweaked in some fashion.
Very good. The other thing I was going to point out in there's a revenue section. So when I got on the board and we would forecast local receipts, and Steve and Kevin would forecast it appropriately in their eyes, and we came in higher like year after year. And so I got on a bit of a soapbox saying, well, why aren't we forecasting higher? And there's words in this document to talk about you should not over what's the word I'm looking for? You don't want to have an aggressive number and then not meet it. and Steve can easily speak about that, although he doesn't have to now. But there was also the revenue. You shouldn't and don't increase revenue greater than 4.5% year over year. Anything over that's considered, upwardly volatile. So there's some, what I found interesting, and I hope you read it and find it interesting as well. So, comments, questions?
Here,
All right, as we move to the, I had this in committee comments. The other thing that I sent was a budget cycle, budget process cycle that was just a one-page PowerPoint doc. So those on the committee may recall, Peter McManamar had put together this framework at a meeting, say last spring, I want to say, and I talked to Steve and Kevin about it, tweaked it just a little bit. And again, for myself, for us all, it's just a framework trying to outline, the process and in some timelines. I won't read it end to end, but, mid-September, kind of this meeting, giving us all a little forecast of how things look next year. So as we get into the fall/winter, when we're doing subcommittee meetings and discussions, we'll have an understanding of what the approximate budget increases might be and work with the department heads and work with the others in the subcommittees to that end. So, you see the meeting like tonight is about mid-September, and then, the planning meeting took place mid-September, and then late September, the full committee meeting tonight. And then we have a tri-board meeting that we did, I don't know if this is the second year or the third year, Steve, reestablished, but.
Well, this
so
will be the second real one.
Right. So that's in the charter, I believe. And again, over the last couple of years, we had a lot of dialogue as a board about, trying to do things differently and then realizing things were in the charter to just follow, if you would. So, and the tri-board is the town council, ourselves, and school committee getting together to talk about the financial position of the town as we move into a fall budget process planning. So that is to be scheduled. I don't know if the date's finalized yet, but that'll be coming late October or so.
Yeah, the date is not finalized that yet, but I will finalize with that with my chair tomorrow. We're leaning towards the 21st of October.
Okay.
And then hopefully the Finance Committee could have a meeting on the 29th, which is when we would discuss the articles for the November 7th town meeting. I think it's November 7th.
Right. So the town meeting, I do have that written down. The town meeting is Saturday, 11/7. For those that have not heard, it is in high school again, I think, Steve.
Yes, it'll be at the high school field house again. Yep.
And so then in October, November, Steve et al. Town management will kick off the department heads working on future budgets. And then we all, as subcommittee members and finance committee members, get involved. And then in the springtime frame, department heads come in, and subcommittee chairs and members just speak to their efforts. Usually have a small write-up about their activities in the review process with the department heads. So anyway, just a framework. Nothing new on here really, I don't think. But Peter had started it. I liked it, and just wanted to get it out to all. Take a look at it. If you have comments, we can tweak it. It's not a policy. It's not a Bible, but it was just some information that I found helpful. Comments on that? All right, and we already spoke about it, but the budget policies, it looks like there were page numbers, because I was looking at it and kind of getting lost. There were page numbers on, but I think it's been copied so many times, the policies and so forth. But as Dan said, over time, I think if it came through this committee, we could give consideration to updating it if appropriate. So for reference and review. Any other comments, questions? All right. The other items, excuse me, other items I had, it's some AOB, all other business would be reappointments. Doug, Amy, and Dawn have been reappointed for another term. Thank you for your decision-making and welcome you back again. Remind you that at reappointment, you should stop by and be sworn in by the town clerk for purposes of being, again, sworn into the town and being appropriately able to vote. So I'd ask you to do that. As far as subcommittees, I have not updated the subcommittees. I will be doing that and would hope, well, I will have you something probably before the 29th meeting. I was waiting for the new members to get on board. Relative to subcommittees, if you have a preference, you want to change, you can let me know. No guarantees. Death and taxes are the only two things I would guarantee. But you're welcome to send me a request, and I'll do my best to see how it all plays out. And relative to subcommittees, just our role on the subcommittee is to to counsel the department heads, to dig down at a line item by line item level with the department heads, work towards trying to meet a budget that's sustainable, that is financially prudent, and so forth. So, it's not your responsibility to ensure that they absolutely come in on budget or so forth, but you work with the department heads. If something doesn't go right or you're not comfortable about it, then it's in your write-up. You had discussion about it and there was a, disagreement or whatever. My point being is, if the school committee comes in with 11%, you've been talking about 3%, well, it's not your fault. It's the process, and we'll work through it. So that's the role of the subcommittee, to dive into line item by line item to see what the the abnormalities may or may not be, and get more information from Steve. Call Steve directly, talk to the department head, etc. And then when you come to the meetings, when the department department is presenting, typically you provide a little summary of how your activities went. So that's my message to that. Schedule ahead was somewhat covered as well. We're going to have one more meeting before fall town meeting, and that looks like it will be 10/29. And the tri-board meeting is to be determined. The tri-board meeting is usually held in a big place, but now it's going to be on a big Zoom screen, I would think, where all the board will come together, and we'll cover financials and so forth. So that was my list of items. Questions, comments? Okay. So some people think Zoom is easier. I find it easier from a logistics perspective to get somewhere and get where I need to be. Other people have a big issue with it, but we'll see where the world takes us. We do have a room that we meet at Town Hall, and hopefully we'll get back there soon. So if there's no other questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Excuse me?
One thing, Mr. Chairman, this is Steve. For any member, and particularly the new members, if you want to sit down or have a Zoom meeting with Kevin and I to go over anything, or to just introduce yourselves and to get a little bit of our philosophy, we're certainly very happy and willing to do that. And again, want to thank the entire committee for all their help. We would not be as good shape as we are if it weren't for all the hard work you guys do. So thank you.
Yeah, I would like to, this is Dan, I'd like to echo in on what Steve said. In the past, for new members, I've done sessions or sit-down sessions to talk about the Finance Committee, its role. I have lots of documents, information regarding, there's a handbook. For example, I have information, so if any of the new members, either one of you would like to spend some time, I'd be happy to go through the various documents I have that would explain our role, what we're supposed to do, some of the chapter and verse of Massachusetts financing laws. I've got that. So you can reach out to me, and I'd be happy to give you a little education as well with Stephen and Kevin.
We used to do it over beers. Maybe we still will. I don't know.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, we did. We used to do this over a beer.
Just one, huh?
Well.
All right, with that, are there any other comments?
No, Mr. Chairman, I move to adjourn.
I'll second.
Second by Dan. All those in favor, raise your hand. I will not do a roll call on this. I'm sorry. Very good. Thank you, and appreciate it. We'll talk again soon. Take
All
care.
right.
everyone.
Yeah.
Everybody.